Have you ever pulled the trigger on your gun and discovered that something didn't work right? This is Alan with Quarter Horse Arms, and in this podcast we're going to talk about things that go wrong with your firearms. So they fall into two major categories. One is a gun malfunction of some type, and the other is an ammunition malfunction. Of the two, ammunition issues or firing related issues are much more common. Gun malfunction, mostly we're looking at things like a part broke, like a recoil spring, or the sear, or there's a trigger problem. But then when we go into looking at the gun more closely, we're going to look at things like misfires and stoppages. A stoppage is exactly what it sounds like. Something didn't work the way it was supposed to. So, you may get something where you get a failure to extract. You fired the gun, and for whatever reason, the extractor didn't pull the cartridge out of the chamber, or the casing rather, or it got stuck in there. I mean, maybe it was a little dirty, or there was some flaw with the cartridge, or a combination of the events, so that when the gun fired, and I'm talking about semi-automatics at this point, is as the slide came back, the spent casing stayed in the chamber, and then as the slide moved forward, it stripped off another round from the magazine, and it ran into the casing. So now it looks like you may actually have, what appears to be 2 rounds. Okay. Well, easy enough to deal with that is, simply clear it out. And you're going to go, hey, Alan, how the hell do I do that? Well, it's a really good question. I'd start by dropping the magazine and then pulling the slide back. That should take care of the extra round loaded in. And in all likelihood, if you work the action afterward, you can pull the casing, or the extractor at that point may work, and pull the casing out. If it doesn't work, you're probably going to want to take some sort of dowel or brass rod and just kind of tap the casing out of the chamber. So if something like that happens, don't go rushing off to fire the gun again. Clean it. You have to consider that the gun is a tool, and if you ask any mechanic, they like keeping their tools clean and things operational. So if you haven't cleaned your firearms in a while, you might want to. And that would include, cleaning things out like the chamber, getting rid of all the crud that's accumulated. And then, so basically doing a field stripping just to clean it out. You may want to bring your gun into a gun dealer or a gunsmith once a year and just kind of let them run through the entire action, do a complete disassembly, and let them check the gun out. All right, so in that particular case, that's just a failure to extract. You may also similarly wind up with a situation where it fails to load. It happens fairly rarely. I mean, I had it happen with a pistol where the feed ramp was very steep and it tended to jam firing hollow point bullets, or a certain type of hollow point. Obviously, I couldn't use that gun for defense because having a round jam while it's loading is a bad thing if you're in a bad situation. And then the final one, which would be a failure to eject. All right, so you have to remember, on a semi-automatic pistol, once the pistol fires, then you have an extraction where the casing is being pulled from the chamber, and then an eject where it goes flying out of the ejection port. So if you get a failure to eject, most people call it a stovepipe because that's kind of what it looks like. So you actually get a casing sticking out, usually at like a 45-degree angle, sticking out of the ejection port, blocking it. Most of the time that I've seen that happen, it's operator error, meaning the person that was firing the weapon kind of had spaghetti arms or let their arms bend when they fired it. And what happened is the recoil energy, which the pistol needs so it can extract, eject, and load a new round, that's being used up as your arms pulled back. So you're actually losing energy that the gun needs to operate effectively. And that's a simple fix. But again, you're going to have to drop the magazine and work the slide and clear the jam. Again, that's not a big deal. Now, keep in mind that when you're doing this kind of stuff, keep the gun pointed downrange. Because, you never know what the problem could be, and that's just safe firearms practice. All right, so unless, something changes, all the weapons should be aimed downrange. Okay. So in that particular case, with a stovepipe or a failure to eject, is just tighten up your arms while you're shooting. Floppy arms will get you a stovepipe. You see that a lot too with novice shooters. Okay, so those fall into the category of stoppages, meaning something kept the gun from working. The next three things I'm going to go into are what fall under the classification of misfires. And you have to be careful with these because one of them can potentially be a little nasty. So the first one is called a squib. You fire the gun, you may hear a pop, a very muted bang, so it just didn't feel right. The pop may have just been the primer. On occasion, especially with home reloads, you run into an issue where you may have a bullet where the powder or the right amount of powder or no powder was put into it, so when the firing pin hit the primer, the only thing that went off was the primer. And that's got enough energy, usually to knock the bullet into the barrel, but not launch it clear out. So you need to be very careful with this kind of stuff because you do not want to fire again, because you have a bullet stuck in the barrel. So the way to deal with that is, again, drop the magazine, pull the slide back, and easiest thing is take a pencil and stick it down the barrel and see if it goes all the way through. Please don't put your eye up to the barrel to look through it. You don't need to see that it's jammed. A pencil will work fine. Now, the risk is if you have a round stuck in the barrel and don't know it and shoot again, you'll probably damage the barrel. You may even blow part of the slide mechanism apart. I mean, this is dangerous. So if it doesn't sound right, check the gun out. I mean, if your car was making funny noises that you hadn't heard before, you're usually going to try and figure out what it is or bring it to someone to take care of it. And squibs, just like the failure to extract, usually a short brass rod, a mallet, and tapping it out tend to work fine. Whatever you do, don't take some sort of big steel rod or a screwdriver and start wailing away on the bullet, because you're probably going to misshape it. And if you're using something that's, like heavy duty steel screwdriver, you could wind up scarring or scoring up the inside of the barrel. So once you tap it out, I wouldn't fire it again. I would probably bring it to a gunsmith and let them check it out. And if you're not comfortable tapping the bullet out, let them do it. I mean, it's great to be proficient at shooting, but you want to make sure your firearm is fully operational. And I can tell you that I've actually never had a squib. I have had 2 of the next category, which are soft primer strikes. This is where the firing pin or the striker did not hit with enough force to cause the primer to go off. And for some guns, a lot of the SIGs, a lot of Tauruses have what's called second strike, or it's double action, single action, which means, if there's a round loaded, you can pull the trigger. If it doesn't go off, you can pull the trigger again. I've had a few of those, and the first time I was like, I wonder if the second strike thing works, and it did. I can guarantee you I didn't hit the target because it startled me, because I didn't think the round was going to fire. What you can do is you don't want to pull the chamber or pull the slide back right away, because it could be that there's also what's called a hang fire. And this is where, for some reason, maybe the primer didn't go off completely, or for some reason the powder is doing a slow burn, and the gun could go off. So the easiest way to deal with that is, number 1, don't pull the slide back, because if it's a hang fire and you've opened up the chamber and that bullet goes off, you may have a piece of metal come flying back at you. You may damage the gun, and you may wind up getting a pretty severe injury. So, easiest thing to do, and this is what I recommend, is keep the weapon aimed downrange. Give it about 30 or 60 seconds. Smack the butt of the pistol. Maybe if something's burning, maybe that'll trigger it to finish the job. The thing you need to be careful of is that if you do eject the round and it goes off while it's on the ground, somebody could get hurt. Odds are it won't happen. And based on, the physics, without having the bullet in a chamber, if the powder goes off, odds are the casing is going to go flying faster out than the bullet will. And, once you've gotten it out, don't play with it. I wouldn't stick it back in the gun to shoot. Just treat it as a round that, depending on the round, for the 10 cents to $1 that it just cost you, use a different bullet. You'll see a lot of stuff like that with 22s where they've got a high dud rate. And most of them, it's just plain and simple a dud round. But with pistol and rifle ammunition, I know it's going to be boring as all hell to keep the gun aimed down range at the target. But the last thing you want to do is put the gun down and then have it go off. And when it goes off, it spins somewhere and winds up shooting somebody. And that would be a bad thing. And so those are pretty much the basics. However, there's one other thing that I've run into. Kind of the opposite of a squib. Had a customer doing his own reloads. And apparently he was playing